You are scrolling through your phone when someone drops a comment that feels like a punch to the gut. Your chest tightens, your jaw locks, that familiar fire starts spreading through your veins, and before you know it, you are mentally rehearsing comebacks at 2 a.m., replaying the moment over and over like a broken record. Sound familiar? That burning sensation isn't random. It is not weakness. And it is definitely not about them. Here is the devastating truth that will shatter everything you think you know about anger. The people who trigger you most aren't showing you their power over you. They're showing you the exact parts of yourself you've been running from your entire life. Most people spend decades trying to build thicker skin, practicing meditation, forcing themselves to rise above it. They're fighting the wrong battle. They think the enemy is out there, when the real enemy is the part of themselves they refuse to meet. Carl Jung, the legendary psychologist who mapped the human psyche, discovered something that will make your blood run cold. He found that we don't get angry at people, we get angry at reflections. Every person who sets your teeth on edge, every voice that makes your skin crawl, every personality that sends you into a spiral, they're all mirrors. But here's where it gets twisted. You are not seeing what you are. You are seeing what you've buried. Think about the last person who really got under your skin. Picture their face. Feel that familiar irritation rising in your chest. Now, what if I told you that everything you hate about them is something you've disowned about yourself? The arrogant colleague who talks over everyone. That is the confident voice you were told to silence as a child. The overly emotional friend who makes everything about them. That is the part of you that was shamed for having feelings. The cold, detached person who never seems to care. That is the emotional numbness you learned to survive. Jung called this your shadow, the version of yourself you decided was too dangerous to exist. You spent years perfecting the opposite. If you were told you were too loud, you became the quiet one. If you were shamed for being needy, you became the helper. If expressing anger got you rejected, you became the peacemaker. But the shadow doesn't disappear. It just waits. And when someone else lives out the parts you've locked away, something primal awakens. That is not anger at them. That is grief for the parts of yourself you never allowed to breathe. Every time you feel that flash of rage, you are not responding to what is happening now. You are responding to what happened then. You are 7 years old, and your parent snaps at you for being too sensitive. In that moment, you make a silent vow, never again. You lock away your tender heart and build walls of logic and control. Now, 30 years later, someone dismisses your feelings, and suddenly, you are that 7-year-old again, feeling small and wrong and too much. But instead of recognizing the pain, you get angry. Instead of seeing the wound, you attack the mirror. Jung understood that most human behavior is driven by what he called complexes, emotional patterns created from unresolved experiences. Every time you are triggered, you are not reacting to the present moment. You are reacting to an unhealed memory that has been running your life from the shadows. The person who makes you angry isn't doing anything to you. They're simply activating a program that has been running in your unconscious for decades. They're pressing on a bruise that never healed. Here is the part that will make you question everything. The people who trigger you most are not your enemies. They're your teachers, showing you exactly where your healing lives. Most people's solution to emotional triggers is simple. Control the outside world. Avoid difficult people. Cut off toxic relationships. Build better boundaries. Create a life so perfectly curated that nothing can touch them. But Jung knew something they don't. Control isn't peace. Control is anxiety wearing a mask. Real peace doesn't come from arranging your life so perfectly that you never feel uncomfortable. It comes from meeting the parts of yourself that react to discomfort and learning to hold them without judgment. Think about the people you try hardest to control or avoid. What is it about them that makes you need to manage their behavior? What would happen if you stopped trying to change them and started getting curious about your need to change them? The truth is brutal. Most people don't want emotional freedom. They want emotional control. They want to never feel triggered, never feel small, never feel misunderstood. But that is not liberation, that is emotional imprisonment. Jung believed that the goal of life wasn't to become invulnerable, it was to become whole. And wholeness includes the parts of you that feel things deeply, that get scared, that need connection, that sometimes react from old wounds. So what does it actually look like to stop being controlled by other people's energy? It starts with a simple but revolutionary shift. Instead of asking, "Why are they like that?" you start asking, "Why does this still move me?" Every trigger becomes a doorway. Every reaction becomes information. Every moment of anger becomes an invitation to meet a part of yourself you've been avoiding. Let's say someone interrupts you in a meeting, and you feel that familiar surge of rage. Instead of focusing on their rudeness, you get curious about your reaction. Where have you felt silenced before? What story are you telling yourself about what this means? What part of you needed to be heard so desperately that being cut off felt like an attack? This is what Jung meant by making the unconscious conscious. You stop being driven by patterns you can't see and start choosing your responses from awareness rather than reactivity. The goal isn't to stop feeling. It is to stop being hijacked by feelings that don't belong to the present moment. Integration means you can feel the full spectrum of human emotion without becoming it. You can notice anger without attacking. You can feel hurt without collapsing. You can experience rejection without making it a story about your worth. This is what Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming whole. You can't become whole while you are at war with parts of yourself. But the moment you stop fighting your reflection, you start reclaiming your power. Here is what shadow work actually looks like in practice. It is not just therapy speak or spiritual bypassing. It is the daily practice of meeting your disowned parts with curiosity instead of judgment. When someone's confidence feels like arrogance to you, you ask, "Where did I learn that taking up space was dangerous?" When someone's vulnerability feels like manipulation, you ask, "When did I decide that having needs was shameful?" When someone's success feels like a personal attack, you ask, "What story am I telling myself about my own worth?" The parts of you that you've buried don't need to be fixed or eliminated. They need to be seen, understood, and integrated. The loud part of you that you've silenced might be the very voice you need to speak your truth. The emotional part of you that you've hidden might be the compass that guides you toward what matters. Jung discovered that the shadow isn't something to destroy, it is something to befriend. And when you befriend your shadow, other people lose their power to weaponize it against you. Imagine walking into a room where someone used to trigger you completely. Same tone, same attitude, same behavior that once sent you spinning. But this time, you don't flinch. Not because you've become numb or detached, but because you've made peace with the part of yourself they used to activate. You see them clearly, but more importantly, you see yourself clearly. The fire that used to consume you is gone, not because you don't care, but because you are no longer projecting your unhealed wounds onto their behavior. This is where the real transformation happens. When you stop seeing difficult people as problems to solve or avoid, and start seeing them as mirrors to learn from. That person who always makes everything about themselves. They're showing you the part of you that is starving for attention, but has learned to get it through serving others instead of asking directly. That person who seems cold and disconnected. They're reflecting the part of you that had to shut down emotionally to survive, but now can't access your own feelings. Every person who bothers you is carrying some aspect of your disowned self, and instead of running from them or trying to change them, you can use them as a map back to the parts of yourself you've lost. Here is the profound shift. When you stop needing people to be different, they lose their power to disturb your peace. You are no longer trying to control their behavior, because you are no longer dependent on their behavior for your emotional stability. You are no longer taking their actions personally, because you understand that their actions are about their wounds, not your worth. This doesn't mean you become a doormat or accept bad treatment. It means you set boundaries from a place of self-respect rather than reactive anger. You say no because it is not aligned with your values, not because you need to punish them for triggering you. Jung had a phrase that will change how you see every relationship in your life. I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. Most people live their entire lives as prisoners of their past, reacting to current situations through the lens of old wounds. They meet their partner's stress with the defenses they built against their father's anger. They interpret their boss's feedback through the shame they felt from their mother's criticism. But when you've done the work of integration, you are no longer bound by these unconscious patterns. You can see the difference between what is happening now and what happened then. You can respond to the person in front of you rather than the ghost from your past. This is what psychological sovereignty looks like. You own your reactions, you own your triggers, you own your boundaries, and because you own them, no one else gets to control them. The people who used to send you into emotional chaos become powerless, not because they've changed, but because you've reclaimed the parts of yourself they once had access to. Your ex who made you feel invisible, they can't touch your sense of worth because you no longer need external validation to know you matter. The friend who always interrupts you, their behavior doesn't trigger your rage because you've made peace with your own voice and no longer need permission to speak. There comes a moment in this process, Jung called it the transcendent function, where something fundamental shifts. You realize that your peace was never dependent on other people's behavior. Your worth was never up for debate. Your emotional stability was never at the mercy of someone else's mood. You walk through the world differently, not because you've become cold or detached, but because you've become rooted. You can engage with difficult people without absorbing their energy. You can feel triggered without being hijacked by the trigger. You can be misunderstood without needing to explain yourself into exhaustion. This is what it means to be psychologically free. You are no longer reactive. You are responsive. You are no longer defensive. You are discerning. You are no longer controlled by your emotions. You are informed by them. People will still judge you, still project onto you, still try to push your buttons. But your buttons are no longer connected to your core. They can press all they want, nothing happens. Not because you don't feel it, but because you don't absorb it. You've become what Jung called individuated, a person who knows who they are regardless of who is in the room. So how do you actually get there? How do you move from being constantly triggered to being emotionally sovereign? It starts with a simple but profound practice, radical self-inquiry. Every time you feel that familiar surge of anger or irritation, instead of focusing outward, you turn inward. Instead of asking, what is wrong with them? You ask, what is this bringing up in me? You sit with the discomfort. You feel the sensations in your body. You track the emotions without immediately trying to fix or change them. You get curious about what stories you are telling yourself, what memories are being activated, what parts of you are feeling threatened. This isn't about analyzing yourself into paralysis. It is about developing the capacity to be present with your own experience, without being overwhelmed by it. It is about creating space between stimulus and response, between trigger and reaction. The practice is simple. Feel it, don't feed it. Notice it, don't become it. Learn from it, don't be controlled by it. When you've done this work, when you've faced your shadow, integrated your disowned parts, and reclaimed your emotional sovereignty, something remarkable happens. You stop living in reaction to other people and start living from your own center. You can be in a room full of chaos and remain calm. Not because you are suppressing or avoiding, but because you are centered in who you are rather than reactive to who they are. You can receive criticism without collapsing or attacking. You can be rejected without making it a story about your worth. You can be misunderstood without exhausting yourself trying to explain. This is what Jung meant by psychological maturity. You've moved beyond emotional survival and stepped into emotional mastery. You are no longer trying to get your needs met through other people's behavior. You are no longer trying to heal your wounds through other people's validation. You've become what you were always meant to be, a person who belongs to themselves first. Here's what happens when you truly embody this work. The people around you change. Not because you've manipulated or controlled them, but because you've stopped giving them the energetic material to work with. The person who used to push your buttons can't find them anymore. The relationship dynamic that used to trigger endless conflict simply dissolves. The patterns that kept you stuck in reactive cycles naturally transform. This isn't magic. It is psychology. When you change the energy you bring to relationships, the relationships themselves must change. When you stop being available for drama, drama stops finding you. When you stop being triggered by other people's wounds, they stop unconsciously targeting yours. You become what Jung called a container, someone who can hold space for other people's emotions without being consumed by them. You can listen to their pain without taking it on. You can witness their struggles without trying to fix them. You can love them without losing yourself. The final stage of this journey isn't indifference. It is integration. You don't become someone who doesn't feel. You become someone who feels everything but is controlled by nothing. You can feel anger and respond with clarity. You can feel hurt and maintain your boundaries. You can feel triggered and stay grounded in who you are. This is the ultimate freedom Jung was pointing toward. You are no longer a prisoner of your reactions. You are the author of your responses. People will still be people. Some will be kind, others cruel. Some will understand you, others won't. But none of that defines you anymore because you've stopped outsourcing your identity to other people's behavior. You've built something unshakable, a self that doesn't need to be managed, validated, or protected from the world. A self that can engage fully with life without being destroyed by it. This is what it means to never be bothered by anyone again. Not because you don't care, but because you care from a place of wholeness rather than woundedness. Not because you've become invulnerable, but because you've become real. And reality, Jung discovered, doesn't flinch. It simply is. And when you've found that place of being within yourself, nothing outside of you can disturb it. The people who once triggered you become simply people. The situations that once sent you spinning become simply situations, and you become simply yourself, clear, centered, and free. The work isn't about becoming perfect. It is about becoming whole. And when you are whole, the world can no longer break you, because you've already put yourself back together. The question isn't whether you'll face difficult people or challenging situations. You will. The question is, who will you be when you do? Will you be the reactive person controlled by old wounds and unconscious patterns? Or will you be the integrated person who meets life from a place of awareness and choice? The shadow work Jung talked about isn't easy. It requires you to face the parts of yourself you've spent years avoiding. But on the other side of that discomfort lies the greatest gift you can give yourself. The gift of emotional freedom. You don't have to spend the rest of your life being triggered by other people's behavior. You don't have to carry the wounds of your past into every present moment. You can choose to do the work, face the mirror, and reclaim the parts of yourself you've lost. And when you do, you'll discover what Jung knew all along. The person you've been looking for outside yourself has been waiting inside you all along. The peace you've been seeking in perfect circumstances already exists in your integrated being. The love you've been trying to earn from others is the love you owe to yourself. This is the path to never being bothered again. Not through avoidance, but through integration. Not through control, but through consciousness. Not through perfection, but through wholeness. The choice, as always, is yours.